Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on YouTube. This is Attacking Third live following US versus Japan in the quarterfinals of the 2024 Paris Olympics alongside Darian Jenkins and Sandra Herrera. I'm Lisa Carlin. Somehow, ladies, the US gets the job done in extra time. A Trinity Rodman banger with her left foot sends the United States through to the semifinals of the Olympics. If you're joining us live on YouTube right now, thank you so much for being here with us. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube page because we are going live after every single U.S. women's national team match to recap it all, give you analysis and the insight that you want to hear from Dee and Sandra. And also, we've got a conversation happening in the chat. Darian, Sandra, what do you want to see from people joining us live right now in the comments in the chat section on YouTube? Darian, what do you want to see from them?
Oh, you put me first.
Yeah.
I actually was already thinking as soon as we got a goal, what's the next match going to look like? How
Ooh.
is the US going to line up? I want to know what people think the subs are going to be. If Emma Hayes is going to rock with what she's been rocking with, the same 11 again, if she can, minus Coffee Albert, I think that'll be the switch. But what other changes do you think Emma Hayes is going to have?
Oh, I like that. So drop your changes in the chat if you're with us live on YouTube. Sandra, what do you want to hear from the people?
I'm gonna say I also want to hear about changes, but I want to hear about the changes that they wanted to see in this particular match that we're gonna run down. So that's what I want to know about.
Oh, so changes from this match, also changes moving forward. I want to know what you grade Emma Hayes fans that are listening to us.
Yeah,
Out of 10, what
yeah.
does she get as the head coach of this U.S. women's national team against Japan in the quarterfinal match? What are you grading her on a scale of 10, Sandra? Is that what we go by?
I want to know because I'm always dropping the ratings after these games. So I usually start everyone off at about a 5, and everyone gets a grade. It's not just the player. Emma Hayes gets one too. So you're right. I definitely want to know what the folks are grading Emma Hayes out of this one. I'm not gonna lie, she's getting a lower grade for me this time around. Would have liked to have seen some more changes. I'm going 6.5 or 6.5.
Oh,
I
okay,
should have had
Sandra,
like an
you
Olympic postcard or something.
yeah, it's like the gymnastics in the
Yeah.
Olympics. Sandra does grades for everyone, players and coaches following all the matches. Read her stuff, cbssports.com. Share it on social too because she's our girl. She writes everything and she's got it. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. If you're live with us on YouTube, we are also a podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, anywhere you listen to your podcast. And we're also on Galazzo Network. So thanks for joining us and hit up that chat. We want to know from you. Subs, changes, rankings for the players and for Emma Hayes. Let us know. We really want to hear from you. And now we get to dive into the recap. Hey everyone, welcome into Attacking Third for a special U.S. Women's National Team quarterfinal match against Japan recap episode. Spoiler alert, the U.S. gets it done. Forward Trinity Rodman with the game-winning goal in extra time for the United States. They are advancing to the semifinal, and we are recapping every single second of this match. And there was a lot of seconds because we went into extra time alongside Darian Jenkins and Sandra Herrera. I'm Lisa Carlin. Darian, we're starting with you. 1-0 win for the United States in extra time over Japan. What are your initial reactions to this match?
Praise be that we got the league goal. Shout out to Trinity Rodman. Yeah, that was a tough match. I genuinely thought that we were going to see both teams go into penalties. Sadly, I really was not looking forward to it. Hate penalties, hated them as a player, hate it as an analyst and as a fan watching soccer. So I'm happy we got that done, but my heart also breaks for Japan. They had such a great game. They had a great tournament. I'm sad we didn't see them meet up a little bit later in this tournament in the Olympics, but it was a really good game for Japan. I think they were actually the better team for most of it.
Sandra,
Yeah.
what are your initial thoughts?
I'm just over here in the background shaking in my head in agreement. I mean, yeah, tough to see the scenes at the end, right? The victors go the spoils, the joy of the victory and the agony of defeat. Japan, I think, showing a little bit, of who they are, reminding folks of who they are, but in both sides of the ball, in good ways and in bad. Um, I think back to that first opening group match where they maybe could have had a result against Spain, and it just didn't go. They weren't able to capitalize on certain game scenarios and opportunities, and it feels like a little bit of that kind of followed them today in this game. And for the United States, my God, just like sweat off the eyebrow for myself. It was tense watching this game. But you know what? When we did our preview, I said I had a little bit of nerves going into this one, and rightfully so, because there were a lot of stretches of this moment, I would argue, full time of regulation, where it was very tense, very, very narrow, slow in the pace, and not in that methodical things are going to happen kind of way, more in a will they make it happen kind of way. So high drama at the at the highest level, right? At the highest stage of the Olympics. I guess that's what we're all here for sometimes.
Previewing of this USA Japan match, we talked about how it was the 41st meeting. And Sandra, I think you said that this one might have been one of the most enticing, and it was the most stressful for sure. I can't tell you I've watched all 40 of those matches, but this one was a chess match. It came down to the fine details from both sides, with Japan and the United States having a game plan, trying to stick to it. The momentum shifts throughout the 120 minutes of this match were so key in how much stress I had at the moment going into it. We are going to talk about all of it, the starting lineups, the first half, the second half, the first half of extra time, the second half, the substitutes that came, and frankly, the substitutes that didn't come. However, before we get into it, Sandra, you are joining us live on this beautiful Saturday afternoon in a black beret. You were wearing gold earlier when we did our recap of match day 3 in the group stage, and now you're in black. Is that an ominous sign from you? What does that mean?
I hope it just means that I'm a lover of hats, and that I happen to have many in many shapes and sizes and colors.
Great fashion
I'm thankful that it wasn't ominous and that it wasn't like in mourning and for a funeral. Hopefully, it's just on par with the style, and then continues to kind of bring good luck. Because as long as they keep cooking, I'll keep rocking the race.
Wow, I'm actually so glad to hear it's only stylistic and it has nothing to do in reflection of who you think's going to win gold or what's going to happen for the United States. So that's good to hear. And of course, you're always fashionable. So calm down, people on YouTube. It's not because she thought the U.S. was going to lose. In fact, she knew they were going to win all along.
Oh my goodness, hater energy, live in full effect.
Exactly. We gotta keep it all straight here. Okay, let's talk starting lineups from both of these sides. We're going to start with the Japanese starting lineup because they had 5 changes heading into this quarterfinal match. And because of that, we got to see a bit of a 5-4-1 formation. Yamashita was in goal. Minami and Kumaji and Koga, Kitagawa, Nagano, Hasagawa, and Moriya, also Fujana, Tanaka, and Seikei, who were up top, but it was really Tanaka and Seikei who were kind of alternating between those front two, but Fujino, back in the starting lineup after missing the last 2 matches for Japan. So needless to say, some fresh legs rolling out for this Japanese side. On the other side, for Emma Hayes and the United States women's national team in their starting 11, we had 1 forced change due to midfielder Sam Coffey being unavailable, out with yellow card accumulation and suspension. So Alyssa Nair in goal, Crystal Dunn, Emily Sonnet, Naomi Girma, and Emily Fox across the back line. Corbin Albert slotting into the midfield for Sam Coffey, with Rose Lavelle, Lindsay Horan, and then the trifecta up top, Mallory Swanson, Sophia Smith, and Trinity Rodman. There was a note to the game day or the match day roster that midfielder Jaden Shaw was back available. She had not been on a match day roster throughout the group stages due to a leg injury, so she was back on the match day roster. Croy Bethune had been moved to an alternate, and defender Emily Sams was still on the match day roster, replacing Tierna Davidson. But this is a young lineup that we saw, Darian. 27 years, 163 days, the youngest starting 11 in a knockout match of a major tournament since a quarterfinal against England back in the 2007 World Cup. But no changes really for Emma Hayes except that 1 forced substitute. Did you expect that?
Low key, yes, because she proved me so wrong in our last prediction of how the subs, if we thought there were going to be more subs even in the previous match. I think we really saw, though, that it needed to happen. I think that we saw players with extremely tired legs. The mistakes early on in the games, especially, were very evident that it was just down to fatigue. And when you were just missing those simple passes, you're playing the incorrect foot, you're trying to get rid of the ball too quickly, you're not letting play develop. It just shows how tired the team was. But props to these players because they overcame it. I think they got better and better as the game went on, which is surprising, just logging more minutes, more miles on your legs. But I'm surprised. Like I said before, I'm really interested to see what that means going into the next game because it is such a quick turnaround, and that's what's fun about this tournament, but also such a beast is how to manage the players and get the best out of your team in these critical games that just get harder the better you do.
Yeah, it wasn't too surprising. These adjustments that came for this game were essentially forced upon the coaching staff. We're talking about yellow card accumulation to Sam Coffey and managing injuries, which the coaching staff has done really since the Olympics have started. But the fact that it's an injury to Tierna Davidson, which everyone was kind of hopeful with bated breath that could something like a knee contusion be played through, possibly, but they just were unable to get that swelling down. And so Emily Sonic gets the start again. So I was, a little bit not concerned, but one of the things I knew I was going to keep my eye on was how this team was going to be able to break down lines against a very organized Japan side, especially with players who were getting starts that maybe weren't going to get tasked with starts initially, because Emma Hayes has pretty much showed us who her preferred 11 were going to be, that ideal starting lineup that we got to see throughout the duration of that group stage. So what was it going to look like, and the passing was there, but it wasn't exactly into the final third. And I think we saw how we missed maybe the presence of a Tierna Davidson, of Sam Coffey. And I think that also contributed to maybe some of what we saw, because sometimes when you make those adjustments, it disrupts what has been built already. So necessary adjustments, but I wouldn't say that they were ones that were these sort of thought about overnight, planned, for weeks type of adjustments. They were made because they had to be made.
In this starting 11, I think most of us predicted that Corbin Albert was going to start in place of Sam Coffey. So not a lot of surprises there. But when you look at the Japanese side and how that they had 5 changes heading into that match, that's a heavily rotated Japanese side. How much of a factor is that, considering, I mean, hindsight right now, Darian, we know that Emma Hayes played these starting 11 for 90 minutes. She did not make a change until the extra time started. How much of an impact did Japan's heavily rotated side have on the US's zero rotation?
Guys, their pressure was relentless. It was poetry in motion watching this Japanese side and how organized they were in their press, the angles that they were cutting off. They made it so difficult for the US. I think even a full strength US having fresh legs, have a full squad would have been so difficult to break down, let alone a side that made 5 changes, looked like they had more energy. I think they looked so fit. And I think typically we just comment that on the US side. This Japanese side looked so fit and together, and so disciplined in their movement. And they were okay not having the ball. They let the US have the ball, which I think was also that mental energy we have to expend of making so many decisions because, okay, press is coming from here. I know I have this pass, but it's going to come right back to me. Now what? I think we saw so many mistakes and lapses in focus that we're not used to seeing. I think we have to give a lot of credit to Japan because they were fantastic in their defensive principles and picked the right times to go. And I love it. We wanted the challenge. We finally got it. We saw what the US was made of and they came out on top.
We sure did get to see the US be tested because the way Japan sat back in it was a block, right? A 5-4-1 essentially, but it wasn't like Australia's low block that had a really low line of contention. It was a really high line that Japan was playing. They were so organized and staying really compact between their lines to put pressure on the US's back 3 in possession, back 3, to force them to make decisions in their defensive third of the field. But it made the field really short because of how organized Japan was in their defense and their game plan, that they were going to sit back a little bit and then attack in those moments. The game plan, Sandra, for Japan was pretty impressive to see. And it was clear that Japan had a plan going into this match against the United States.
I love that part of that plan may have just been like, hey, we too will be patient as well. And we're going to be patient in a way that we're just going to run you down a little bit, but not as active as maybe you think. Look, full respect to this Japan program. I have said, I think time and time again in the build up to this game, that they're a program that found themselves rebuilding kind of quietly over the last cycle or so. And to have the youngest roster in these Olympics, I think is a testament to that. And they're not playing like a young team with inexperience. They're playing like a very intelligent team that understand the game plan that is in front of them, depending on the opposition. And the fact that they rolled out with changes for their starting 11 and then continued to make those rotations on the other side of the ball, that could be discouraging, knowing that they've just got fresher and fresher legs to come after you. So it definitely showed, I think, a little bit of who they are and what they bring onto the pitch in today's game.
It shows the intelligence of the Japanese coaching staff to know, okay, how are we going to fluster a United States side that went undefeated in the group stage? They scored 9 goals. They have threats up top, and Japan nullified those threats, forcing the United States to go into extra time. But we're going to dive into the 90 minutes of regulation play between the U.S. and Japan. What worked, what didn't work for the U.S., what probably they could have done a little bit better. Don't go anywhere. We are talking U.S. against Japan in the quarterfinals of the Olympics, breaking it all down. Hey everyone, welcome back to Attacking Third. The U.S. defeat Japan in extra time 1-0 thanks to Trinity Rodman to advance to the semifinals of the Olympics. But it took 105 minutes to get to that goal. In regulation play, that's where I want to focus right now, Darian. The U.S. had trouble getting into their attack, finding their front three. It looked a little disjointed. What did you notice about how the U.S. was, I'm going to say, trying to attack, not necessarily succeeding, but trying to attack?
US looked fatigued. You could see the minutes coming in. I think a big factor was just the tired legs that saw a lot of missed passes, playing the incorrect foot, the run and the lane of the pass weren't matching up. I think we saw a lot of impatient shots when there were better options, but a lot of it just comes down to mental lapses for me. I think we saw decision making that wasn't the best that we're used to seeing with the US. Then ultimately, I think it gave Japan the edge because, like I said before, they were causing the US, they were forcing the US to make so many decisions because of their press, because of how organized and how much they were able to anticipate what the US was trying to do. And I think I saw a lot of frustration. Balls were just kind of going out of bounds. There was a lot of missed passes. The US wasn't playing to their strengths, which is let these players go 1v1, especially when Japan is in a very organized mid to low block. Their pressure is really good. Let your cheeky players take control of the game. Rose Lavelle needs to be on the ball a little bit more. We didn't see her enough. We didn't see Trinity Rodman going 1v1, especially in the 90 minutes. Same with Mallory Swanson, Sophia Smith. Sophia Smith didn't come alive until extra time. So Japan did really well, but I think we just saw the US frustrated with things not coming together, and it got a little bit better as the game went on, but not until extra time.
For Sophia Smith not coming alive until extra time is just too late. It's just way too late. You can't have that. You don't get 90 minutes until you start the game. You get the warm up, and then you have to be ready to go in the first minute. Sandra, how much do you attribute that to a failure? I'm going to use failure as a loose term right here. A failure for the United States versus a tactic by Japan and their good defense.
Right. It'll definitely be looked at as like an opportunity, right? Like that's what the coaching staff is going to use going into that semifinal because they were unsuccessful, right, in that capacity during the game. I think you could bring up the points of lack of rotation, lack of subs, tired legs, quick turnaround in between Olympic games as points to make in regards to maybe the slower play. But we also saw those adjustments come into play and maybe lead to some of that disjointedness. And sure, those are all things that folks can bring up. But we didn't get to see the best, from the midfield today, even with those changes. And you would think maybe fresher legs could lead to that. Corbin, Albert got slotted into this game to start and plays for Sam Coffey. And this is a player that unfortunately hasn't had a lot of starting minutes with this national team over the course of the last couple of months. And so to kind of be thrown into the blender like that, I think people expected to maybe see missed passes or lots of back passes. I think when you take a look at that passing map through 70 minutes that started circulating around for OptaStats, it's a horseshoe. Nobody was making passes into the final third. It's funny to take a look at and think about now. So it's not so much for me reflective of one specific player or another type of player or across the lines. Folks who were passing this ball around were not effective in getting it to the final third. And that's from the back to the middle third and the front line as well.
I also think there was a lot of times where I'm thinking, go over the top.
Yes.
Go over the top, hit a long ball. At times when the U.S. did play a long ball, though, where I was like, finally, it was 3 touches too late. It was very obvious that that's what's going to happen. It's a look, a touch, a look, a longer touch, and the ball's played. Japan already knows you want to play a long ball before you even know, honestly. So it has to be with some sort of disguise, some sort of quick combination, or, set, hit. Even if it's blind, turns them around, let your forwards go 1v1, get set pieces. This is how the U.S. could have scored. I mean, historically dominates Japan in set pieces. Most teams do. I don't think the U.S. did enough in that to actually ask questions and maybe make Japan respect that ball going over the top in those 1v1s early in the game. I think that would have maybe changed the course of the 90 minutes if they had.
But I'm also thinking, like, who was going to deliver that? I had that thought too, Darian, and I was like, okay, what if we try just bypassing that? But it's like, who's going to connect that ball? There's no Davidson to do it. Coffey's out. I think we saw an attempt very early on from Sandra Herrera on that header, and like that was it.
She cut it. She had it on her left. I actually took a note of this. She had it on her left, cut it back to her right to serve to Herrera. Herrera's offside. Yeah. It was a great idea, but I think Japan was also so smart in kind of targeting Emily Sonnet's side, knowing she's not predominantly left-footed, and knowing that there's maybe is going to be body positioning that's incorrect or touches that are going to be a little bit loose because she wants it on her right. It's very uncomfortable to play in that position in the back line with your right-footed. And I think that they did a really good job of shutting that down, so we didn't get the service we wanted.
The U.S. lacked the balance of trying to possess and trying to penetrate through possession to the front line and to the attacking end and playing those direct balls. We talked about that, I think, on Thursday, Darian, and having that U.S. needing to find that balance and making it unpredictable for Japan as to when they were going to do it. And the times that the U.S. thought about playing the long ball, it was unpredictable, but then it became so telegraphed because of all those extra touches. So the ideas were there, but I believe the fatigue was a huge factor in why the U.S. couldn't do that. And of course, positionally, you mentioned Sonnet being predominantly right-footed on the left side and not being confident in herself to play those left-footed direct balls over the top into her teammates. And there were moments where I was like, just hit it. If you shank it, then we'll know and we'll probably make fun of you a little bit, but just hit it. Because if Sonic could make that left-footed ball over the top, even once or twice, it would have been timed correctly. And then the U.S. would have had a different look and a different opportunity. But we didn't get to see it enough. There were moments we saw sparks of it, but not enough. Okay, we've got more to talk about with changes, who we wanted to see and who we didn't. We're diving into it next when we get back. Welcome back to Attacking Third. U.S. get the 1-0 win over Japan to advance out of the quarterfinals into the semifinal. They will play on Tuesday, opponent TBD. But we are recapping the quarterfinal for the U.S. against Japan. We talked a lot about the U.S. not finding that balance between direct and possession style of football. But one of the notes I took down is that the U.S. wasn't finding Rose Lavelle in enough on the ball, especially in the first half. So we go into halftime. It is tied up 0-0. Second half, we don't get any changes from Emma Hayes. Instead, we get to see Japan having different moments of attack, specifically down the right side where they had a lot of numbers and they could attack the left flank for the United States and targeting a little bit of that Emily Sonnet space that was there. But when we look at the midfield for the United States, we did get a change with Corbin Albert slotting in there. And with Rose Lavelle, Lindsay Horan, and Corbin Albert in there, I want to talk about those three. And Sandra, when you look at those three in the midfield for the U.S., how do you rate their performance individually and as a unit against Japan?
I'm just kind of like thinking like you keep low key like plugging my ratings, Lisa, and I love you for it.
Hey, that's what for.
I'm saying that I feel the support. I think in terms of like the midfield trio, I think you've got Lavelle up top, maybe Horan kind of middle of that, and then Albert kind of at the bottom of that. If you had to kind of rate them 1 through 3 in that aspect, I think for the lack of the ball, Lavelle was at least providing constant movement. I mean, she was running. I thought in attempts to be a more connected midfielder. I mean, she won fouls, she won a corner, got a couple shots off early in the opening half. So I think that kind of shows and highlighted some of her game a little bit. Lindsay Horan is a player that we've been talking a lot over the last couple of games in particular, kind of wondering about a little bit about her form. And I think once you get to the knockout rounds in a quarterfinal, that's even more elevated. I think folks are going to look to her as a player that has a lot of experience and want to bring a little bit more. And I don't know if we've actually seen that over the course of, I think now we could maybe say a third consecutive game in the Olympics. And I think really early on, especially, we're talking opening 15 to 20 minutes or so of this game, just passes that were being made and they just simply died. Like all of a sudden a pass was attempted and it just like passed away, and it found itself resurrected at the foot of a Japanese player, and that was deeply frustrated. I think in the opening 3 minutes, there's an attempt from Corbin Albert to try to get involved with Horan in a counter press to win the ball back, and a player just zooms right by the both of them. So there was definitely moments where they needed to kind of adjust and grow into the game, but this is one of those tough kind of games where I'm not sure if anybody actually grew into it. Folks may be thinking that it turned into a real slug match at the end. I would argue that maybe it was a bit of that throughout 120 minutes in general.
I thought Corbin Albert played pretty well in this match and in this midfield. Of the midfield, she was the one that really stood out to me in her role and what she was tasked of doing, because the way Japan was playing, they were going to sit back and allow the US to control a lot of the possession. And then once the midfield for Japan won it, they were going to move quickly in transition. And it was Albert's job to sit in those pockets, plug the holes, and stop transition. And in the moments that I noticed her, it was when she was making those hard tackles and stopping the run of play from Japan to be dangerous in their very deliberate attack. But ultimately, it did fall a bit flat for me in the midfield for the United States. In my rundown of this episode, and watching this game, I put a note at halftime, no subs for US, not surprising. 70th minute, I said no US subs again. 80th minute, no subs. 88th minute, no subs yet. And I put a bunch of question marks and exclamation points. We didn't get any subs in this regulation. Darian, who would you have wanted to see come in for Emma Hayes to change the game in regulation?
I would have loved to see Casey Kruger come in on the right side. I thought Emily Fox, they're asking her to sit a little bit more, but I think Casey Kruger gives a little bit more in the attack than Emily Fox does. And I think she also logged so many minutes she needed to rest. And sadly, we saw her go out with an injury. I hope she's okay. Hopefully it's just a knock or just bad cramp and she'll be back next game. But I really wanted to see Kruger come in. I mean, how many times have we seen her have last-ditch tackles in this tournament? But we haven't seen her get into the attack, and the U.S. needed to score, and so I think she would have been really effective. I did want to comment on the midfield. I think there was a big lack of chemistry that I saw today. I wasn't sure if they were all on the same page. It looked a lot of the times, Albert's an 8. She doesn't want to be that 6. She's naturally an 8. You see it because sometimes she's playing a pass and then making a through run after she does it. You can't really do that unless you have cover. And we saw the US get punished a couple of times for it. Thankfully, there was no goal that came from it, but there was scoring opportunities and attacks that Japan had because of it. So I think there needs to be more of a balance of, do you go into a double pivot when Albert's there? Because she has a tendency to kind of go forward, that's why she's there. She's very effective when she does that, but it left the US really vulnerable. And then everyone's scrambling to get back. So I think that attributed to a lot of why the midfield fell really, really flat. And we saw Rose Lavelle doing 5 different positions so she could get on the ball.
It's so true. Especially with her end moved up higher at times. It was tough day.
Yeah, there was a massive hole. Yeah.
And Rose Lavelle has talked about how she's trying not to run so much, how
Exactly.
she's trying to conserve a little bit of her energy. And it
Homegirl
felt
was
like that
everywhere.
first 30 minutes. And then it was almost like she knew she wasn't getting the ball and she wasn't on top of it. So she was trying to run everywhere and get in these pockets and find the ball. But the passes were off. It was a little sluggish. There was a lot of just offness between this team and how they were connecting passes. No one really going to the ball, looking for it at their feet. And after 90 minutes, it was still tied 0-0 for the US. They looked tired. Japan had made a number of changes. We were headed into extra time. Don't go anywhere. We're chatting about the 30 minutes that we got extra between US and Japan next. Welcome back to Attacking Third. Darian, Sandra, and Lisa here chatting about the U.S. against Japan and recapping the entirety of this quarterfinal match. Because after regulation, tied 0-0, we went into extra time. So 15 minutes on the clock, and we got to see our first change from Emma Hayes for the U.S. women's national team. Forward Lynn Williams, full leg wrap and all, coming onto the pitch in replace of Mallory Swanson. Interesting substitute. I want to know, Sandra, what did you make of this first change that we got to see in the knockout rounds for the U.S.?
I'm not going to lie. At first, I was like, not the player I thought was going to come off the pitch. And I know Emma Hayes has done a lot of preaching about just taking care of the game that's in front of them. But you have to wonder, with extra time in front of you, you are pushed into making that move where you have to look ahead just a little bit. So perhaps maybe saying, bring this player off. We want to wrap this up. And at the very least, extra time and not go to penalties. Lynn Williams, I think, showing right away what she provided. She's a forward, and yet she came into this game and provided so much counter-pressing and absolutely clinical in terms of defensive press. Came up with a block, I believe. Someone could definitely fact check me on that, but immediately getting involved. And despite the leg wrap, looking like she may have had some of the freshest legs out there at that moment compared to anyone else. So you got to make those moves, unfortunately, with an eye potentially on penalty kicks and maybe even into a semifinal that you're not technically already, qualified for. So while I like that it was the Lynn Williams sub, I was a little hesitant how it would have played out with Mel Swanson. But knowing that they're going to the semifinals now, I think maybe it's a brilliant move because you've got a Mel Swanson on a little bit less minutes than maybe some of your other forwards.
So you're saying maybe Emma Hayes knew. She was like, we're going through. She's solid in her crystal ball. Darian, what about for you? Extra time. I mean, what changed in this extra time?
I think that we finally saw the forwards being isolated, and Sophia Smith came alive. She was finally checking down to get the ball. She was turning. She was being that bully that we saw in the previous matches where she was going 1v1. She was rolling defenders off of her. She was taking shots, albeit not always the best decision at times, but she's hungry to score, which you want that from a forward. She looks confident and sure of herself and her movement. And just her touches on the ball, I think, are better than what I've seen her with the national team since ever. Not that she ever really has that many bad touches, but I think she just looked so in control of her body physically, where she wanted the ball, where she was putting the defender, how she was anticipating where the ball was going to come out. And I think that that's ultimately what kind of helped and brought so much attention to her. And then you have Trinity Rodman going 1v1. You have Lynn Williams running her butt off all over the pitch. I think it was a really good sub because, like we've said before, Lynn is the best defensive forward in the world, in my opinion. I think she's able to track back, win possession, help defend so much, and be supplemental in the attack. So I liked this sub. I actually wish I would have seen it a little bit sooner. I think Swanson looked pretty tired coming into this match, especially the last 20 minutes. She looked really, really fatigued. But I think Lynn did really, really well.
I liked Lynn coming on because of what she provides energy wise, right? She does have much fresher legs considering she was a substitute in the group stage play. However, taking off Swanson, I didn't like that. I didn't want that. What was being called for in this match up until this point was tight spaces, technical players getting the ball with two defenders on, having to spin and get out of that. And Swanson is one of the top two technical players on this team in tight spaces. That's where she wants the ball and she can thrive on it. She can drop deeper. And throughout the final 15 minutes of regulation, we saw that so much more. Swanson was going to the ball. She was looking for it at her feet, combining much better with Rose Lavelle at the end of regulation. And I wanted that partnership to continue to build, especially because, as you mentioned, Darian, Sophia Smith wasn't doing that much in regulation. She didn't come alive until the extra time. So this sub to me of bringing Williams on in replace of Swanson was a shock. At that point, I would have taken off Sophia Smith because she hadn't really found herself in this game. She hadn't found a spot for herself. And as the extra time started and the match went on, I was like, okay, I think Emma Hayes is going to switch up her game plan and she's going to look to go a bit more direct. And she is going to force that out of these players because without Swanson sitting in front of Japan's back line and in those half spaces, wanting the ball on the half turn, it was going to be Lynn Williams, who was going to be a bit more relentless in her counter press ability and running around to get onto the ball again and win it off Japan. So I knew immediately that, okay, Hayes is going to look to go a bit more direct. And that's ultimately what did happen because we go into halftime of this extra time. Jenna Neiswanger comes on in replace of Rose Lavelle. So we got to see Neiswanger in the midfield. But there ultimately comes a goal, and it comes in the result of a direct ball. Darian, break down this goal from us and what you saw in the buildup, and ultimately with pink hair Trinity Rodman and a bit of a shot from her.
Well, it's funny. Right before she scored, she kind of woofed a shot, like very similar with her left. It had no bend on it. It went really far near the corner flag. And I made a note of, we're being very impatient with our shot taking. There needs to be better decision making. There can be combination play, or just get closer to goal, get a better angle. Lo and behold, Crystal Dunn sends the ball over the top to Trinity Rodman. She brings it down. She's cooking. She cuts it over to her left and just wraps her foot around this beautiful upper 90 shot to the far post. Keeper can do nothing to stop this. Gives US the lead. But I thought this was brilliant because, especially as a forward, when you're taking so many shots, there's this kind of desperation I started to sense with the team where everyone's just trying to shoot. They know you need to score. It's difficult to find a window, to pick a right moment. Japan's goalkeeper, Yamashita, was having an amazing match. I think she was coming up so big for them. You start to feel that anxiety of, I need to score. I don't want this to go to penalties. We need to get this done. For Trinity Rodman to come up and keep taking those opportunities to shoot on her weaker foot, was so great to see. I think it showed the evolution of her game a lot, and that she's going to be the future of this U.S. women's national team. And I think she's having such a great tournament. I'm glad she got that goal tonight.
We're comparing
105th minute +2. So the stoppage time at the end of the first half of extra time is when Trinity Rodman gets that goal. Sandra, did you know she was going to score? Or do you think we were going to pens?
No, absolutely. I didn't know if she was going to score. I think if we're comparing, I was going to say if we're comparing notes, I said mine actually says desperate times ? Like desperate measures, because that shot before the goal actually goes through. There's a little bit of that that we're starting to see at that moment in the game. The desperate moments, maybe the sense of urgency that wasn't quite there, at the end of the regulation and even in stretches of the extra time. But I think for Rodman to kind of walk away with this game that she had, because there were some challenges there through the 90-minute regulation. We saw Japan kind of targeting and closing in on that side in particular, trying to make Fox ineffective, to make Rodman ineffective, and to just sort of kind of keep up with this just relentless effort. It's just so representative of Rodman and who she is as a player at this moment in her time in her career. And I love the celebration after it. It absolutely looked like one of relief mixed with some layers of joy, and maybe part of getting these shots off so late in a desperate manner could possibly be a little bit of what Hayes and the coaching staff is feeding to that attacking line. They want them to be shooters. They said they're telling them and tasking them, go be a shooter, shoot. And we wish maybe we would have seen a little bit of more in the regulation, but it finally came in extra time. And yeah, I mean, Emily Fox, shout out to the pinned image in our live stream right now, because it's again, there's a mix of relief and joy within it for sure.
And after that celebration, and in the midst of this photo that we're showing right now, they just collapsed to the ground and were like dogpiling on each other. But the talk for the U.S. that we were mentioning about missing those direct balls, and without Tierna Davidson in the back line to play some of those, Sam Coffey not on the pitch to play some of those direct balls, the assist for this goal comes from Crystal Dunn on a direct ball. And Darian, this is a player that maybe was in and out on the bubble of this roster initially for the Olympics. She wasn't getting the starts under Emma Hayes in that left back position. It was Jenna Nightswanger. Dunn was listed as a forward on this Olympic roster, and since then she has started every match of this Olympics at the left back position, and she gets the game-winning assist in the knockout round. How crucial was Crystal Dunn today?
Man, in Dunn we trust. She is crucial to the success of this team. Like I said before the Olympics, I thought that the left back position was much more up for debate than we were really seeing, because Crystal Dunn 1v1 defending and how consistently she makes correct decisions is better than anybody on the pitch, in my opinion. Naomi Girma's up there with her. Sandra and I were talking about this too. Naomi Girma's up there with her, but I think Crystal Dunn is called upon a lot more because of how much she does in the attack for the U.S. And for her to come and get an assist, knowing that she wasn't even starting for her club team a couple months ago, she wasn't starting for the U.S., she was on the bubble, she fought her way in, she stayed consistent in her game, and showing that it's paid off is absolutely incredible. And I think I love that we're seeing it statistically for this team and helping them advance into the next round.
Just nodding here in the background, constantly in agreement with Darian, especially on Crystal Dunn. We absolutely got to give her flowers on this segment. And it's all because of how you laid it out, Lisa. This is, and Darian, this is a player who wasn't actually getting those minutes, but it goes to show you that when you get to these moments, when you get to the biggest stage with the brightest lights, sometimes those coaching staffs will go with the player that you can trust. And I think knowing that there's a lot of first-time Olympians on this roster, that they have to lean into some areas of experience and leadership, and it's done 100%. She has come up in such crucial moments of games. She has covered a ton of ground for this team. We have watched her get moved around tactically from that fullback position, asked to play higher to close some games out on the front line, and she's doing it all seamlessly. So I think next to Rodman, I think we've got Crystal Dunn as a player who's having an absolute golden ball type of tournament for USA.
Absolutely. In my notes, I wrote down, thank goodness for Dunn in this game. Tracking. She has penetrating passes. She's covering defensively. She is doing work on both sides of the ball, and she absolutely did. It's pretty cool that she then gets on the stat sheet with the assist, right? Because so much of what Dunn does goes unnoticed at times. There were even moments during this game where the US was going to swing the ball around their back line, which is pretty much what they did all game. The passing patterns between Fox, Girma, and Sonnet were insane. And there would be Dunn looking to break a line, pressing up higher than Japan's first line of attack to be the option to penetrate the first line of defense for Japan, get the ball, and then she was turning. She was attacking the defenders. She was going at them 1v1. It was incredible. She created 2 chances, and she had 13 dribbles passes into the final third. She was 3 of 8 for her accurate long balls. Crystal Dunn, perhaps woman of the match. We'll see. We gave a lot of love to Naomi Girma as well. But the U.S., they get the win 1-0 over Japan. Don't go anywhere. We are talking about what comes next for the U.S. Hey everyone, welcome back to Attacking Third. Darian and Sandra here with me and Lisa. US get the 1-0 win over Japan. I just want to finish that conversation real quick for player of the match from the US, from both of you. Darian, Sandra, I'm going to start with you in the beautiful beret.
I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep it with Crystal Dunn. Shout out to her for the performance that she's put in today and the shifts that she's put in over the course of the group stages. She's obviously leading not only off the pitch, but on it as well. And I mean, look, that goal doesn't happen if you don't get the right person the ball. And she delivered that assist on what was ultimately the game winner. So I'm going with Dunn.
Oh, I also want to say Dunn, but just to give another player flowers, I will. I'm going to say Trinity Rodman. I want to see her heat map because she was up and down the right side of the pitch. And even early in the match, when you could see the fatigue in her body language was a little bit not as we usually see her. She was fouled numerous times and got back up and kept going. Should have been a yellow card. She just kept trucking through and ultimately got a goal after taking opportunities that weren't on frame even. She kept her confidence, and I think we've seen a lot of growth in this player, but especially throughout this game, I was very impressed. And for her to get the game-winning goal, she has to be my player of the match.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Shouts for Dunn, shouts for Rodman. I'm going to give my shout to Naomi Girma. She is the backbone of this team organizationally, defensively. She is a level head on the pitch always. She's the only player so far to have played every single minute of this entire tournament, and she never looked tired. Not for a single second. I should say outfield player, right? We got to give some props to Alyssa Nair because she came up big with some saves in this match as well. But Naomi Girma is my player of the match for the United States. We have to talk about Japan in this match because they put up a heck of a fight, advancing out of their group, only losing once in their 3 group stage matches, however, scoring a number of goals throughout that run, advancing second out of their group, and they had a game plan. They came to play. Darian, you mentioned this at the top. It's a shame that the U.S. and Japan met so early in these knockout rounds. What impressed you about Japan's play throughout this Olympics?
Their precision and how they pressed at the beginning of the show. I said it was like watching poetry in motion because it is so difficult to get 11 players on the pitch to understand each other's movements, spacing, make real game time decisions as to the angle you're going to approach a ball, how you're going to arc your run to cut off certain passing lanes and spaces so to help your teammates out and force pressure to where you want it to go. They did that for 90 minutes. It was very impressive to watch. They were clean. They picked the correct moments to try to attack. And it was just a total different game than we've seen the US have to go up against. And I think we finally got the challenge. They made us see what the US is made of, that they can sustain a team like Japan and come out on top. But I think Japan was just so fun to watch. They're so clean on the ball. And how physically they've grown into this game has been fun. There's definitely been an evolution. Sandra talked about it on our show on Thursday, an evolution in how this team plays. And I think we really saw that tonight, that they can compete with the best teams in the world. And I can't wait to see what's next for them, because I think everyone's going to take notes on how Japan presses and is organized, and whatever trainings they do, I want to know, because it was incredible.
Yeah, look, this is an Japan national team that didn't qualify for the 2016 Olympics. They found their way back to the Tokyo Games. They have been trying to put in the work to sort of redefine their program and layer in elements of their game that maybe that weren't associated with them before. And I think we're starting to see that. We saw them have a really fun 2023 World Cup run, and it's why we kept our eye on them in these Olympics. And they're a young squad. They're a young roster, and they're going to continue to get better. And they're not going away by any means. They're definitely going to be a team that perhaps we see them again in another knockout round stage.
This is the first time throughout this Olympics that Japan was shut out of this tournament. I think a lot of credit has to go to the United States defense and making sure to just nullify them. But ultimately, the U.S., they get the job done. They've been in 5 quarterfinals in major tournaments that have gone to extra time, at least extra time, and they've advanced past that stage 4 of those 5 times, only being eliminated once. The U.S., they get the job done 1-0 in extra time over Japan in the quarterfinals. Thanks to a 105th minute banger from Trinity Rodman, the U.S. advanced to the semifinals of the Paris Olympics in 2024. They will take on Germany or Canada on Tuesday. Germany and Canada are playing in the quarterfinals this afternoon, Saturday at 1 p.m. But Monday, we will be back in studio previewing everything for the U.S. as they take on their semifinal matchup. Will it be Canada? Will it be Germany? Hey, guys, we'll find out soon enough. But the U.S., they get the job done today. Shouts to our players of the match, Crystal Dunn, Trinity Rodman, Naomi Girma. I want to give special shouts to Alyssa Nair as well, because she had a heck of a tournament so far, continues to get shutouts and be a leader for the U.S. But ultimately, the U.S. advanced out of the quarterfinals, beating Japan 1-0 thanks to Trinity Rodman. Thanks, everyone, so much for joining us. For Mark, Courtney, Darian, Sandra, I'm Lisa. This was Attacking Third.